Phase 5 of the MCU is just about to wrap up with Ironheart coming out next month. We have all 6 movies of this phase out, so today we're going to do a tier list / ranking of all these projects. Welcome back to J Penny Reviews. I hope you all have enjoyed your weekend. If you like the video, please consider giving the video a like and subscribing. It would mean so much if you did. Needless to say, this video may contain spoilers for all the projects in Phase 5 of Marvel, so if that's something you care about, you've been warned. Kicking off Phase 5 was Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and boy was this a huge miss. I remember being so excited for this movie when I saw all the trailers. Kang was being set up as this Avengers level threat, and this movie was being advertised as a more serious movie for Ant-Man, moving away from the lighthearted comedic tone of the first 2 movies. But all we got was a mess of a movie that had little to no serious tone at all. The green screens were horrific, the movie was giving Scott a little too much shit about his victory lap for his work in Endgame, and in case you haven't heard this already, Kang the Conqueror, the successor to Thanos, loses to Ant-Man and an army of ants. Not to mention MODOK. That was such a hilariously bad choice, and I kinda like it, but it was a good idea executed horribly. But now that the dust has settled, I don't think this movie is as bad as people say. Paul Rudd is still incredibly likable as Scott Lang, and I thought Kang was a really cool villain in the movie. And now that he's no longer the big bad for the Avengers, it makes his defeat in Ant-Man a lot more stomachable. I think as time goes on, people will look back on this movie with a bit more grace, and kind of view this as this always being the plan for Kang. He works as a serious threat for a goofier character in this one movie, and I think he's still one of the more interesting Marvel villains that we've gotten in the past few years. And he's definitely my favorite villain from the entire Ant-Man trilogy. So I'm giving Ant-Man 3 a C tier. I have zero interest in rewatching this movie, but if it's on, I'm not gonna have to turn it off. There are parts to enjoy, even if it's far and few between. I think on the grand scale of the MCU, this movie will probably go down in D tier, but I'm feeling a little generous today. Next up, we have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Now, I adore the Guardians trilogy. They are all wonderful movies in their own right, and this movie caps off their story perfectly. For the most part. I love Peter's arc in this movie, and you can always tell when someone's character arc was planned out versus being worked on as you go along. It's very clear that Gunn planned for Peter's endgame to be returning to Earth, and I thought it was perfect. Obviously, Rocket was the highlight of this movie. His backstory was so tragic, and his arc in this movie was also perfect. The other Guardians were just decent. They weren't better, but they also weren't worse than they were in previous movies. I do have a few small gripes with this movie. For me, this movie feels like an amazing first draft of a movie. And when I say that, I mean the dialogue really needed some fine-tuning in some scenes. Like, they say the line, "We need to save our friend," over 9 times in the movie. And I don't know how much is too much to hear one line, but I remember every time I watched it, I just thought to myself, they're saying this line quite often. It's just little things like that I never noticed in the other Guardians movies, but they're spread throughout the entire movie and it pulls me out. I'm also not a huge fan of how they handled Gamora in the movie. Now, before you guys kill me, let me just say, I thought how they handled the end of her and Peter's relationship, I thought that was ended beautifully. That was incredible. I didn't think that's how they were going to end it, and I was so happy with how they did it. And it's my second favorite relationship outcome behind Captain America and Peggy's. But I thought Gamora was way too mean in this movie. She seemed very emotionally unstable and full of rage, and that would make sense if this was her in the height of her primal survival version of herself while working under Thanos when she was younger. But this is just Gamora a few hours before the start of the first Guardians movie. I honest to God think that James Gunn just misunderstood where Gamora was pulled from in the past and wrote her meaner than he had to. And my final issue with the movie is that you can't fully enjoy this movie without watching Infinity War and Endgame. They try to explain away what happened to Gamora, but it's just too much to do in passing dialogue. One of my favorite things about the first 2 Guardians movies is how isolated they are from the rest of the MCU. You could watch the first 2 movies and miss nothing, but now you have to watch 2 other movies just to understand the third. Overall, the movie is great, but it needed a little more time to figure itself out in the smaller areas. On the large scale, it's still amazing, so I'm going to give it an A tier. It was borderline S, but it slipped up in a couple spots. I fully understand those of you that put this movie in S, though. I still love this movie just as much as I love 1 and 2. The Marvels is not good. This movie reeks of studio intervention. The villain was boring, the plot was nonsensical, and it just doesn't work. I thought Captain Marvel was more likable, and Miss Marvel is always incredible, but that was it. There were a few creative choices that I liked. I liked the planet, where singing is a language, but those moments are few and far between. I don't hate this movie, and honestly, I could have fun rewatching this, but I don't want to. If this movie came on, I'd go channel surfing for like an hour before I go back to this movie. So this movie's D tier. Moving on, it's almost F, but the fun moments bring it up just enough. Now, Deadpool and Wolverine is fantastic. This is the single most fun I've ever had watching a movie ever. Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds perfectly understand these characters, and their chemistry is off the charts. The action in this movie is great, the jokes are hilarious, and Marvel actually allowed this movie to go all out and let them tell jokes at their own expense. The story doesn't really make sense if you pick it apart, but I'm okay with that. This is a fourth wall breaking movie where the first 30 minutes is told from the perspective of a lunatic who sometimes can't tell up from down. And the entire movie is just meant to be a metaphor for big corporations buying popular IPs and taking what they like and discarding the rest, as well as franchises dying after losing the lead actor. This movie also spawned my favorite action scene in the entire MCU. This movie isn't perfect, but it's what I needed, and it came out when I needed it the most, and for that alone, I want to give it an S. But I do understand this is not a quote-unquote great movie, it's just a great comic book movie, so I'm bumping it down to A. But I really, really love this movie. Captain America 4 is also not very good. I thought the trailers made the movie look fine, and the leader being the main villain of a political thriller is a great choice. But it was all botched in execution. The leader is very lucky that anything he did worked at all. None of his predictions were accurate, and the movie looked ugly, and I have zero interest in rewatching this movie ever. D tier, moving on. It's about as good as Quantumania. Really the only difference between the movies is the quality of the villain. Thunderbolt, aka The New Avengers, is great. The characters were likable, the plot was straightforward and made sense, and it was just a good movie. I love the overall themes about depression and not feeling fulfilled in life. This movie has solidified Yelena as my favorite Black Widow between the two, and she is my favorite character introduced post-Endgame. This movie is a breath of fresh air, and it's a step in the right direction for fixing the MCU. I want to give it S, but I'm going to go with an A until I can rewatch it, because the first time I watched it, I felt like I had a few minor problems with the movie, and now I'm looking at it with rose-tinted glasses. I think it's hilarious. Phase 5 was literally the definition of a hit-or-miss phase. You had a bad movie, a good movie, a bad movie, a good movie, a bad movie, and then a good movie. Guys, that'll be all for today. The next video will be on the shows that came out during Phase 5. I don't really think we had F or S tier movies in this phase. The worst was inoffensive, nonsensical fun, and the best was heartfelt but rushed. If you guys like the video, please like and subscribe. Comment down below if you think I'm wrong about the Phase 5 movies. Thank you guys so much for watching, and take care.